So coaching Somerset County Cricket Club and T20, looking at T20 format, so how would you, so what different exercises and sort of drills would you do leading up to a T20 game compared to, say, a championship game?
Well, different players will do different things, but generally the game's more explosive, so there's generally a lot more range hitting, where we'll set up practices and actually put different boundary lengths out for the different grounds that we would play on, and they would practice basically hitting sixes. And each player will have different ways. Someone like Marcus perhaps will go more over the offside doing that. Somebody like Josh Butler might go more leg side, and then they'll all have their own specific areas that they'll practice within that. And obviously then the bowlers, who often get forgotten in 2020, because everybody just thinks about the sixes and the fours, will also have their practices to make sure that they can nail their skills. And the game's just more pressurised, so we'll also try and do some practices where we actually set up games and play games amongst ourselves to actually put the guys under as much pressure as possible, because it is a short format. The shorter the format, the more the pressure, because every ball's that little bit more important.
What about the different techniques and shots? Can you give us a few different sort of classic T20 shots?
Yeah, I'd say potentially in two phases. One for the opening 6 overs of the power play, where the best players in those phases are either very good gap hitters and tend to play more proper cricket shots but to hit the gaps, or those who are naturally more able to hit the ball over the infield in the air, guys who are good at hitting the top of the bounce. We particularly practice not trying to hit sixes in that phase. Sixes will come from being in good positions and having a strong base to hit the ball from. But we aim to get the ball basically 40 yards away from the wicket, which means it's gone over the 30-yard circle, and then potentially we're getting boundaries. The other fundamental is that people forget about is actually the singles, and some of the best players in 2020 cricket are those guys who you can't bowl a dot to. So somebody like Mackenzie's hard from that perspective, because he doesn't, and people like Callis, where people remember their boundaries, but actually they score a lot of singles, which makes them very hard to play against.
What about fitness and training? Because obviously there's the going through the techniques, and what about actually fitness levels? Does it differ?
It does differ because the game's quicker, and whereas 4-day cricket is a lot about endurance and longer term strength, 2020 is a lot more about power, explosiveness, and also it's the mental side of actually dealing with that pressure. And the fitter the guys are, the more likely they are to be able to deal with that. And actually, it's interesting watching them when they come off after a 2020 game. They look more drained sometimes than when they've done a day in the field from a 4-day perspective. So our fitness guys will definitely be training in different ways. Unfortunately, our program's very mixed, and so we've now got to play a 4-day game before playing in the finals day. So we have to. Our program's quite generic in mixing the programs.
And just finally, who would you say are the top 5? Your top 5 of all time T20 players?
Name 5. Well, obviously Pollard, that was here before, a guy who could change a game. And did last year in our quarter-final at Notts, a game that we probably looked out of it. All of a sudden he changed that game. We played against Gale when we were in the Champions League, and it's a real shame that he didn't come and play for us this year, because again, just explosive and entertaining. I've already mentioned Callis, who again to me would be an unsung perhaps 2020 player. Alfonso Thomas, who we've got here from a bowling perspective, will probably be one of the UK's probably best bowlers from that perspective. 5th one, I'm not sure. I think we're stuck at 4. A future star, yeah, somebody like we've got Josh Butler, who as far as somebody for the future, and then there's Craig Keatswetter, who hopefully will do well for us finals day as well as England, hopefully in the World Cup, and they're just very exciting players, and generally people remember the batters and they will the bowlers. So anybody who can hit the ball at the park, I like watching, to be fair.
Thank you.